The Carolina Panthers head to Miami as nearly 2-touchdown underdogs. Is it time to shock the world? We'll preview Panthers Dolphins right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
It is Thursday here on the Locked On Network, and you know what that means. It is time for Crossover Thursday, Week 6, 2023 NFL season. The Carolina Panthers visiting Hard Rock Stadium to play against the Miami Dolphins. I'm Kyle Krabs of Locked On Dolphins, joined by Julian Council of Locked On Panthers for this Crossover Thursday. Today's episode of Crossover Thursday is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for first deposit match of up to $100. Julian, it's good to see you. Good to talk a little ball with you. It's been a minute since we got a chance to catch up.
Yeah, man.
Obviously an inauspicious start for you guys. How you holding up?
I'm fine, personally, but the fan base at large is not doing well. Thankfully for me, I'm a UNC Tar Heel fan, and they're currently 5-0, so I at least have that. And it's actually the Panthers versus the Dolphins, and then the Tar Heels versus the Miami Hurricanes this week. Just thought about that. So I have Saturdays to keep my spirits up, but that's not the case for a lot of people who are living for this team. And right now they are dying every single week, hoping that Frank Reich, Bryce Young, and his team figured it out. But so far, yeah, the vibes have not been good through 5 weeks of the season.
Would you say that's like, when you think about 0-5 and the start that is with new coaching staff, rookie quarterback, obviously you had to start with Andy Dalton tucked in there. Is that kind of the main root of what is going on with Carolina, is just a matter of finding your rhythm within so many new components of the team?
Yeah, it's a combination of a lot of things. I think injuries, first and foremost, point to that. Jase Horn has played 24 snaps this season, pulling his hamstring in week 1. He's currently on IR. He's going to be evaluated after the bye week, which is next week. Austin Corbett, their starting right guard, who was their second highest rated offensive lineman last year, according to Pro Football Focus, has not played. He's been on the PUP list. He's now transitioning, about to come back, but that won't be until after the bye as well. So the offensive line has certainly struggled, and losing Brady Christensen at left guard has not helped. You've had to throw out rookies like Chandler Zavala, who was carted off on Sunday in the loss against the Lions of a neck injury. It was scary, but he was able to travel back home with the team, so that's a positive, but does not look like he's going to play this week. So now you're down to your third string left guard. And Ike Ekwonu, who was a first-round pick last year at left tackle, he has not played well this year. So you've seen a regression from him in just the lack of help on the offensive line. The secondary, as I mentioned, Horn, Dante Jackson missed last Sunday against the Lions with a shoulder injury. That has been the norm with him and Jase Horns and their inability to stay healthy. Xavier Woods, who's been an Iron Man, he's also out. So that's 3 of your top 4 secondary starters that have been out there. So it's a combination of injuries, a rookie quarterback, an offense that has not been able to find a rhythm, I think, because of the injuries on the offensive line and just a lack of overall talent, man. Like, Adam Thielen has been a good player in the NFL. He's still been basically what I thought he would be at 33 years old, but it's not like he's explosive. He's not getting a ton of separation. DJ Chark had that 1 year where he's a Pro Bowler in Jacksonville, but throughout his career, that's been the anomaly, and he hasn't really been targeted that much. So this is just a team that has a ton of injuries. They have a new coaching staff, both offensively and defensively, a rookie quarterback, and you put all that together. So far, they're 0-5, and turnovers, they've killed themselves. 8 turnovers this season have led to 45 opponent points. So if you don't turn the football over, you're healthier. There's more continuity on offense and on defense, and maybe you're not looking at 0-5. Like, I personally think they're probably more of a 2-3 football team, but hey, your record is what the record is, and right now they're 0-5.
Yeah, and for Miami coming into this game, I think the primary story, you kind of have the wind taken out of your sails a little bit with Devon Achane. With the performance that he's had the last 3 weeks, and he's second in the league in rushing, and kind of has like this unassuming tackle where he's kind of rolled up on from behind, and he goes out, but then he comes back in and he's on the field for the last third down conversion of the game, and he runs a route on the play. And the Twitter doctors kind of picked up on it, and they're like, oh, it's ankle injury. And they asked Mike McDaniel on Monday, and he's like, well, he has a knee injury, and we're evaluating it. And then there was this domino effect where Schefter reported he was going to go on IR, and then NFL Network said, well, it's week to week, and he's going to get a second opinion. And then it's going to go week to week. And then Thursday rolls around, and sure enough, it is announced that he is going to go on injured reserve. So Achane and his transition with all of the speed that the Miami Dolphins have, he's right up there with Tyreek Hill as like the most explosive weapons, and the youth and explosiveness he has brought to this running game has definitely taken it to a new level in year 2. So for the Dolphins, I would say there is a big injury storyline as well. Certainly not to the degree of what Carolina has had to endure in waves early on this season. And Miami's kind of sitting here playing their own waiting game. That kind of happened with them in the preseason when Jalen Ramsey went down, and you had your first of the 2 Teron Armstead injuries that seem to happen on an annual basis, where he's just unfortunately going to miss time, and he's on IR now as well. So Miami has done well to kind of work around it. I think the objective, and I think this is probably one of the tales of the differences between these two teams and where they're at, right, is Carolina, square one, draft a quarterback. And I think when we get into the conversation around Bryce Young and what he has to work with and how he's performed, a lot of Dolphins fans are going to sympathize with that because it's going to sound pretty familiar versus what Tua Tagovailoa had when he first got to Miami and the kinds of players that he had to throw to. So I know there's definitely, I'm looking at Carolina from my seat, and I'm seeing, I remember when Devontae Parker and Preston Williams were like NFL Next Gen, like the 2 least separating wide receivers, and Mike Gesicki gets an average of 1.1 yard of separation per target. And that's the world that he had to live in. And the Alabama system, even though Bryce, I think, didn't have the same kind of skill players that Tua did when he was there, they didn't have good skill players for their standards, but there was still, I think, a different stylistic way to play that Bryce was able to play that he's not going to have with these kinds of skill players around him until there is more of a buildup. So Miami fans, I think you recognize what it looked like in 2019 and how bad that was. And then when they tried to infuse some talent in, and recognizing that's where Carolina's at, just kind of like getting off of the first square and moving towards building, is kind of the difference between these two teams.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a great example of what the Panthers are right now compared to what the Dolphins were with first of Tua. And yeah, you bring it up with Alabama. He had Henry Ruggs. He had Jalen Waddle. Of course, he's with him now. He had Devontae Smith. Just an embarrassment of riches down there in Tuscaloosa. And when Bryce was there, and the best receivers he had was 21 when they won the SEC, lost to Georgia in the national championship, when he had Jameson Williams, who so far has had an interesting career to start off the NFL. So we haven't really seen what he can do at this level. Then there was also John Mechie, who unfortunately he had his diagnosis with leukemia last year. Now he's come back. I don't know what he's done so far, if he's even played yet for the Texans. And then last year, it was really Jahmyr Gibbs, who is in his rookie year in Detroit, didn't play last week Sunday when the Panthers played against him, and then like Cameron Latu. So it's not like he had a ton of talent last season when he was pretty much the reason why Bama even was able to go out there and win the Sugar Bowl. But now in the NFL, when there's a level playing field, because as poor by Alabama standards as the skill positions were last season, even probably the year before, when they still had more talent across the board than their opponents on a week in, week out basis. Now in the NFL, here at Carolina, for the first time in his life, and you can see the frustration, because at Mater Dei in California, he's playing for the best high school with the best players. He's never played on a bad team. Now he's playing on a bad team with aging veterans and players that just aren't up to the talent level that he's used to playing around, especially when you look at the rest of the league where it's supposed to be a level playing field. Yeah, so it's unfortunate for Carolina where they have not put things around Bryce Young that really elevate him this year, but it's more of a 3-year process to try and get to that point where in year 3, Bryce can really be that difference maker. So they have time. The Carolina Panther fans, after watching 3 years be wasted by Matt Rule, don't really want to hear that right now. They want to win now. They heard all about Frank Reich and the experience of this coaching staff. And so far, that is just not borne out to any sort of wins through the first 5 weeks of the season. And, well, looking at Miami, probably not going to be a win on Sunday either. So 0-6 heading to the bye is the reality we're probably going to face here in Charlotte pretty soon.
Well, and we'll talk about some of those matchups for how this game will or will not break. And that's coming up next. So stick with us here on this crossover Thursday episode here on the Locked On Network. PrizePicks is the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They're the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports because it is you against the numbers, not you against battling thousands of other players, including sharps and pros. You pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections for stats and watch the winnings roll in. You can win up to 25 times your money this football season. Select up to 6 player stat projections. Couple clicks on your phone. It's super easy to do. You can make submissions in less than 60 seconds or less, and you can get that 25 times return on investment. So if you like good return on investment, nailing down some prize picks is probably a good way to go about doing that. You can go to prizepicks.com/lockedonnfl and use code LOCKEDONNFL for first deposit match of up to $100. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedonnfl and use code LOCKEDONNFL for first deposit match of up to $100. All right, Julian. So I'm going to be a good host here. I'm going to let you go first. Matchup that you're excited for seeing how it plays out when these two teams play on Sunday.
Oh boy, I don't even know if there's one I'm excited about seeing. There's one I'm curious about and seeing how the Panthers can match up against the Dolphins wide receivers. Because right now the Carolina Panthers, as I mentioned, they're banged up in the secondary, but surprisingly, they're not bad when it comes against the pass. They're 5th in the NFL. And I know the Dolphins have the number 1 passing offense. Tua Tagovailoa leads the NFL in passing yards. Tyreek Hill leads them in reception yards so far. Like, they're doing what they do. And on Sunday against the Lions, it's not like they got killed through the air. The turnovers are what really killed them in that game, having 3 turnovers in the first half, leading 21 points. The Panthers had to trot out CJ Henderson, Troy Hill, Deshaun Jameson, Sam Webb, who's not even on the team anymore, and DiCaprio Bootle as their 5 active cornerbacks. And I thought overall they were okay. Now, Dante Jackson, he missed last week. He was a full participant at practice on Wednesday, so the expectation is that he should be back on Sunday. He's always had a ton of speed. I don't know if he has Tyreek Hill speed or Jalen Waddle speed, but it's going to be important to get him back. And as I mentioned, they've been a pretty solid passing defense, considering the fact that Woods is now probably going to miss his 4th straight game. Of course, Horn hasn't played since week 1, and who knows when he's going to come back. So that's a matchup I'm looking at. If they are able to hold up and allow Brian Burns, Derek Brown, and this pass rush to get after Tua and really get some pressure, that can give them an opportunity. I looked at turnover differential so far. The Dolphins are -3 this year. The Panthers are -4. Now, the Panthers' turnovers have been catastrophic, but if they can force some, that can give them an opportunity. It's not like their offense is really capitalized when been put in plus territory by the defense with those turnovers. But if there's ever going to be a time to do it, it would be against the number 1 offense in the NFL. So that is a matchup I'm looking at. If these corners can hold up, allow the pass rush to get home, then maybe Carolina can have a chance, because they have not stopped the run at all this year. And I think that's really where Miami should be trying to focus on going into Sunday. But they probably can do whatever the hell they want offensively anyways.
And I think for your point, when teams have been able to kind of bottle up Miami a little bit, it feels like the Dolphins have had a disproportionate amount of their first primary progressions running through Tyreek Hill. So this conversation with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, Jalen's kind of been quiet. And he missed a game with a concussion, and that was the game that they happened to blow up and score all those points that everybody lost their minds over. But
of course,
in the grand scheme of things, Jalen is somebody who I think probably everybody who follows the Dolphins has had higher expectations for his production. And Tyreek's the guy who's gone out and put up 150 plus in a couple of games already this year. So if that is the formula for Carolina, then I would want to see Dante Jackson matching up against Tyreek. And then can you be selective? Can you send, whether it's Von Bell or who's the other safety who's going to step in if Xavier Woods still is out with the hamstring?
It'll be Sam Franklin, who has been a special teams guy back the past couple seasons, but actually he's pretty improved. He had the pick 6 to start off the game against Minnesota a couple weeks ago. So he's been solid for them.
So if they want to send Bell or Franklin and just give a little extra attention to Tyreek Hill, I think that's where for Miami, could this be like the big bounce back game for Jalen Waddle to meet expectations? And that just hasn't happened yet. And teams have had some success in slowing down Tyreek and really congesting his ability to get targets in the passing game. And it's been guys like Braxton Berrios who intermittently steps up and creates a few big plays, or Cedric Wilson, and these ancillary components where Miami's passing game last year was so 10 and 17 dominated that if they couldn't get anything going, nobody else could have won any one-on-ones. Yeah. So I think that's kind of the really interesting part. And I'll piggyback off of that as far as when Miami has the ball. Really interested to see how the middle of the field is defended. And I know Shaq Thompson's down, and that's a huge loss for Carolina. Yeah. But Frankie Louvu's going back to even last year was like a really fun, like multifaceted player. And it feels like he's become like this fan favorite for all of the ways in which he can make impact on the field.
Yeah, he's
Guys
been
like
awesome.
him,
I know he had a hip pointer a couple weeks ago, and the last 2 games he hasn't looked like the same guy.
Okay,
So
but
I'm wondering about how he's feeling right now.
okay. And then even Jeremy Chin, like those guys being able to defend the middle of the field
Yeah.
is really, I think, one of the defining components for Carolina, because if you choose to zone Miami, they run so many of these wrap ins and glance routes and glance posts that it's going to hit between the hat or between the numbers, and your ability to get depth and then simultaneously have some ability to be stout against the run if you go light personnel is really the bind that they try to put you in. So I think that's where when Miami has the ball, I want to know who's lining up where and how much attention they're giving to Tyreek Hill. But then the complementary component of that is, what does your structure look like defensively in the middle of the field, and how are you trying to take away that heat map where Miami just loves to hit those routes?
Yeah, and it's a good point you bring up, because I know on Sunday against Detroit, against Ben Johnson, who was as creative a play caller out there in the NFL, and I know Mike McDaniels has cooked up some sick stuff this year too, and dating back to last year. They played a lot of zone, and that was a situation where you don't have Dante Jackson, you don't have Jase Horn, you don't have Xavier Woods. So you got a bunch of backups, replacement level players, if they're even that. So they're trying to prevent the big plays. They played a lot of zone last week. I wonder, with Dante back, if they're going to try to play a little more man, trying to mix their coverages, opposed to what they did last week. And Jeremy Chin played 18 snaps. It's been interesting looking at his snap count this year. Once Shaq went out, he hasn't really been out there as much. I know it was week 2. It seemed like him and Shaq Thompson, the personnel they like to run. He was tied to Shaq as far as when he would be on the field. And it's been kind of hit or miss whether he's out there on the field. So I would hope that would be the case on Sunday, because they need him to be out there and have some sort of impact. So it'll be interesting to see how they mix their coverages and what kind of impact Chin can have, and what it looks like with Dante Jackson back there at corner this week.
And then when Carolina has the ball, I'm really interested in the performance of Carolina's offensive line, particularly the interior. When you look at Miami, and they went against this giant skeleton crew last week and got all these sacks and whatnot. But generally speaking, there has been kind of this question beyond Andrew Van Ginkel, who was primarily a special teams guy and has been elevated into a bigger role because Jalen Phillips has missed a little bit of time with an oblique injury. Still sounds like they're trying to be conservative with that to make sure it doesn't end up lingering all season long. I don't know whether you'll see him on Sunday or not. I would imagine they'd probably want to make sure he's as good as possible for when you get the Philadelphia Eagles offensive line next week. So unless he's 100%, like, I would not be surprised if he doesn't go, because you do have Andrew Van Ginkel, who's been very, very good. But you got Christian Wilkins, who's looking for a big money contract. Yeah. And up until playing Ben Bredesen at center, which was, it threw him a life preserver for the stat aspirations that he had, because Christian Wilkins really dogged him on Sunday. But that for me is what I'm most interested in when Carolina has the ball, because you have a quarterback who can get off the spot, he can get outside the pocket. What does Miami's interior rush do to disrupt and make sure that Bryce and his vision up the middle of the field is interrupted because he sees color flashing in front of his face? I think that's the number one thing that I'm interested in.
Yeah, and that has been a massive issue for the Carolina Panthers since week 2. Since Brady Christensen went out and they had to go to Chandler Zavala, who was starting out at right guard. He was supposed to be the fill-in until Austin Corbett comes back, which should be after the bye when Houston comes to town. So they had Zavala there, the 4th-round pick at NC State, playing at right guard. Then once Christensen went out for the rest of the season, they shipped him over to left guard because he played at NC State alongside Ike Ekwonu for a grand total of 5 games. But we're supposed to believe that there is some great connection there. And that first game at left guard against Seattle, according to Pro Football Focus, he recorded a 0.0 pass blocking grade. Now, he's not going to play on Sunday with the neck injury. Glad it's not as serious as it looked like when he was carted off on Sunday. So he'll be out. And over there will be Cade Mays. Going back to training camp, Cade Mays, who was drafted in the 6th round last year out of Tennessee, he was supposed to be the starting right guard, but then he lost that job, had a little injury, came back, started at right guard once they moved Zavala over at left guard, but then got replaced by Calvin Throckmorton, who the Panthers picked up off of waivers after roster cutdown day. Now he's going to be there at left guard. So he was supposed to be the right guard, didn't win the job, then played right guard, lost the job, now starting at left guard. That's kind of the situation that they have right now in Carolina with the interior. So Throckmorton, he's a veteran, he's played, but he's not a great player. Mays looked fine, honestly, in the limited reps. But by the time he was in there, it was already garbage time. Like garbage time started in the second quarter on Sunday against Detroit. And Bradley Bozeman, he's had his moments, but overall, he's a solid player for the Panthers. So yeah, it's going to be concerning because they have given up a lot of pressure in Bryce Young's face so far. And it's the problem too, is he gets to the top of his drop. He's ready to throw the football. He's got pressure in his face and nobody's open. So if Miami can cover and get the pressure up the middle like every team has done so far, then yeah, it's going to be a difficult day for this Panthers offense once again on Sunday afternoon.
We'll talk keys to victory. I know, Julian, you already alluded to turnovers being a big one. I think we'll have a follow-up there and talk about what else these winning scripts could look like for both of these teams. That's next here on these Crossover Thursdays, so stick with us. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected, and that's why Jase Medical offers the Jase Case. The Jase Case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you peace of mind so that you're not just hoping you have access to medication in an emergency. Jase Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand. Jase Medical is simple. They handle everything from the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Don't get caught unprepared. Get $20 off these life-saving antibiotics today from Jase Medical by using the code LOCKEDON at checkout at jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. Okay, Julian, we alluded to turnovers, and Miami shot themselves in the foot. And they left every opportunity on Sunday against the Giants to let the Giants back into that football game. That very easily could have been 14-10 going into halftime. I think it's a great point that you make. And Miami, I think they probably felt like they got a little too comfortable as far as, oh, we're moving the ball. Let's be aggressive. We want to score points. You have a ill-advised turnover in the red zone from Tua Tagovailoa that's returned 102 yards for a touchdown. You have another interception where we're kind of in a muddy pocket, and I'm going to throw one up over top of a guy in my face, and it sails over top of Jalen Waddle. And you could have looked up in that fourth quarter or third quarter, and that could have been a one-score game. Now, it wasn't because the Giants couldn't capitalize on the points. So who's the catalyst for turnovers for Carolina, and why is it Brian Burns?
Because he's their best player, and he's the guy that the fans want to trade right now to recoup a first-round pick with some sort of belief that they're going to be able to get a player that's better than Burns. Like, so far, they have not been able to replace DJ Moore, who was a first-round pick. They have not replaced Christian McCaffrey, who was a first-round. Well, they did last year when Steve Wilkes was the coach, but then David Tepper's like, "Nah, I'm good. I don't need this. Let's go get somebody else." But anywho, it would be Brian Burns for sure, because he has been quiet the last couple of weeks, and that's drawn some ire from a couple people in my mention, just being like, "Oh, hey, Burns wants to get paid $28 million, but he didn't do anything on Sunday." It's like, well, he's not going to go out every week and be a complete game wrecker, but this is the game that he's got to do it. And he's frustrated. He threw his helmet off onto the sideline last week after some replacement level player who I don't even know why is even on the roster, Nick Thurman. He jumped off sides on a 4th and 1. Burns is frustrated, went out for a couple plays. He's someone that just wants to win. And he's been here since 2019. He's seen nothing but losing, poor quarterback play. And I feel for the guy. And it's time for him to get paid too. So you do wonder what his future could be. But he would have to be the guy who gets after Tua, can get a strip sack. It was funny because week 1, with all the talk of, hey, Burns, will he play? Him having a hold in, his first play on that first drive was a strip sack of Desmond Ridder. Didn't turn into a turnover, but he's the one that would be the guy you could think could get the turnovers. Dante Jackson has had a history of getting some interception luck. So that's a possibility with him back here in this game, if there is some sort of pressure that maybe Dante can run into one on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, and I think for Miami, a little bit more ball control is the 70-yard touchdowns are awesome. But at the end of the day, if you're playing at home, you're playing in the heat in South Florida, and you're capable of running the ball, which the Dolphins have illustrated an ability to be, take a little bit of the air out of the ball, especially if you do find yourself in a situation where you have put some points on the board early, and try to play a suffocating game. And don't leave the door open for Carolina to make those kinds of plays. I think that would be the key that I would point to for Miami.
Yeah, they should be able to run the football. I mean, the Panthers are sixth worst in the league right now. They've allowed 130 plus to every single opponent that they played this season, and they played the Vikings, who are not a good running football team. So that tells you everything. And you talk about light boxes. Now it's a similar defensive scheme here in Carolina because Ejiro Evero, the DC, he comes from that Vic Fangio tree. And it was interesting to listen to Frank Reich on Wednesday just talk about, the Dolphins with Vic Fangio. They really want to make you kind of, move it methodically down the field. And the Panthers have shown an ability to do that because last week, all three of their drives were 7+ plays from 75 yards out. So they had, and there was a 7-play, 13-play, and a 14-play drive. So they've shown the ability to where they can drive the ball down the field. They can convert on some third downs. And I really think about they need to force that with the Dolphins on Sunday if they're going to win this game. Honestly, you probably want it to be as low scoring as possible, as limited possessions as possible, and try to bleed out the clock. Now, the Panthers haven't been a great running team, but defensively, if they can get the third down, I think they can have some success. Now, Frank Reich, I don't know if these numbers are true or not, but he did come out and say that the Dolphins are averaging 9 first downs per game or 9 third downs per game. The Panthers are second in the NFL in third down defense, only allowing 29.8% conversion rate. So they can get the Dolphins to third down and really force them to have to be out there longer and not have to be able to go out and have the 70-yard plays. Then this could be a game. And I think back to last week, we talked about turnovers. The Panthers were able to force a turnover on downs on Detroit. They were down 14-7. In the next play, they fumble the ball. But if they don't do that, they got on the field and score. It's a 14-14 ball game, and things are different. 21 of the points that Detroit scored, they scored 42. 21 of them were off turnovers. So you take care of the football. You force your opponent to actually have to drive the football down drive it down the field and not hit some big plays. Then the Panthers might have a chance. So I don't give them a great chance. That would be their path to victory on Sunday if they have to make the Dolphins be a more methodical offense than what we've seen so far this season. And man, how in the world they average 500 plus yards of offense?
I can't pinch me. I lived through 15 years of just the most horrid offenses you could possibly cook up.
I don't even know. On Saturdays, I'm used to it, but on Sunday, for that to even be a possibility,
it's like the percentages of the separation from the pack on like 10+ yard explosive plays, 20+ yard explosive plays, 40+ yard explosive plays, and 50+ yard explosive play. And it's like every other possession, they literally flip the field with an explosive play. It is unlike anything that I have ever experienced. I'm just enjoying the ride. Now, last thing,
is it sustainable? Is it sustainable?
I think as long as they do not get overwhelmed with injuries, because it's the blend of scheme with the complementary and compounding elements of Tua's strengths and Tyreek's speed and Jalen's speed and the offensive line's ability to create displacement off the line of scrimmage. So you saw against the Buffalo Bills, Connor Williams went out and at the center position, and it really messed up some of the timing. And they had to play on the road. And as a result, what you ended up getting was kind of these clunky drives. Now, they still finished the game with 394 yards of offense when it was all said and done. So, like, it was still I think there's a lot of teams that would probably sign up for 394 yards of offense. Now,
this one,
they also gave up 48 points. So, like, they had bigger problems in that one, too. But I think largely, unless you are overwhelmed with injuries to impact players, this is going to be up there as far as like total offense in the lexicon of like what has historically been the top of the charts. Our last thing before we're out of here, final score prediction for Sunday.
I don't have a final score, but I saw FanDuel, our friends over there, had the line at 13.5. The Panthers are not just 0-5 this season, they're 0-5 against the spread. So I heard that good teams win, great teams cover. So bad teams lose. I don't know what you call a team that loses and never covers.
Doesn't cover.
That's what the Carolina Panthers are right now. And I have no reason to believe that they're going to be able to be within that spread. So I'm going to take the Dolphins to cover. If they score 40, 50 points on Sunday, it wouldn't shock me. Like, the dam would probably break pretty early in this game if that's going to happen. So, yeah, I think Miami wins big, and they have no problem covering that line of 13.5.
Well, we will have you covered here on the Locked On Network after the game. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Panthers and Locked On Dolphins if you are a Panthers or Dolphins fan, respectively, and check out all of the shows that we have on the network. We have an outstanding collection of talent, outstanding collection of shows, because it is your team every day. Appreciate you guys checking out this crossover Thursday. Enjoy the game on Sunday, and we will talk to you afterwards.